Hey, how's everyone doing? Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, and for the next hour or so, we'll be talking about things ComicBase related, in particular, going into, well, we have a bit of industry and ComicBase news, but after that, we'll be talking a bit about some of the bigger efforts that we're working on for the next major version of ComicBase. It should be a lot of fun. So, please tell your friends, like and subscribe, hit that notification button, all that YouTube-y goodness, and we'll get on to it. Let's see what we got going on here. First, I want to say hi to everyone who showed up here. Welcome. I believe Richard was first up in the gate here, but Andre wants to let everyone know that this new version of the cover catalog, which is this insane effort that he leads to take all the covers that are in ComicBase and somehow turn them into a printable PDF book, which is now available. It's the links are in the forums discussion now, with a link to the torrent. And yes, you do want to get to this by torrent. It's 926,000 images in that one, a mere 28,723 pages long. I pity your printer if it tries to print this one. But anyway, Andre, congrats on that one, and we'll have more to talk about on that in just a bit. Mike Beam, good afternoon from, I forget where you're from, but overcast, feels like fall. Says, Rich is from Pacific Northwest out there. Aloha from Fred Sloda. Jet City Comics, also from Pacific Northwest. And let's see here. Jet City is also conversing about the cover catalog. Our mod is back in the house. Greg Hecht back from his no longer secret message. Greg, Mr. Hecht is Mr. Hecht, and now there is a Mrs. Hecht. Congratulations to them both, to both him and his lovely bride. They just got married out in San Francisco, and much happiness to them both. And anyway, so he's out in South New Jersey, and things are going well there. Let's see what else. He also wants to point out lots of news. Well, I'm going to get into some of it. Greg, you're going to tell me about the CBR layoffs. I haven't heard about that one yet. Did know about the others, and then we'll hit most of the rest of the news in a bit here. Brian Price, welcome. Fred says you saw the Spider-Verse. Heard they made something like 280 Spider variants through the movie. Yeah, there's some real deep cuts in that one. If you've been reading Spider-Man all your life, you are going to pick up on references that could go over the head of almost everyone. Ed, welcome from Canada here, and let's see, is that pretty much everyone I want to say hi to for now? But let's move on. All right. By the way, we have mostly a news-oriented show, but if you guys have anything that you want to see us, questions that are burning on your mind, that's an important thing of what we try to do around here. So please feel free to post them in the chat to @ComicBaseTV, and I'll try to catch those as I can, and we'll take it from there. All right, so on the happy news, of course, our moderator is now a married moderator. On the sad news, unfortunately, John Romita Sr. Just passed away. Absolutely one of the greats of the comic industry. I'm just, gonna put this one up here. One of my personal favorite covers. He did so many. I did a quick check of ComicBase before going to air on the whole thing, and he has nearly 1,000 credits that we noted, to his 1,000 credited issues to his name, countless numbers of covers and whatnot. One of the great, amazing Spider-Man artists for sure, but also did so much else with other things in the industry. His first credit that I could find in ComicBase, actually, I believe, was All Crime Comics number 40 something, 1951. But I'm not sure if that's his official first appearance, but that's the first one that came up just doing a quick search just before airtime. But and I had the pleasure of meeting both him and his son, John Romita Jr., who's also become quite an artist. Really long careers between both of them, and he was just absolute perfect gentleman. It was just one of the good guys. So you're much missed. John, Godspeed, man. And on an indexing note, the question came up with our editors right before showtime. It's like, well, have we made an official decision as to whether John Romita Senior goes in as John Romita Senior or John Romita? Because once upon a time there was no John Romita Jr. And I figure, in light of the fact that John Romita Jr. has also done thousands of comic books over his maybe 40 years in the business, or 30 years at least, I'm going to say, yeah, no, we're going to have to list them as junior and senior. And who knows? Maybe there'll be a third someday. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, that's the bummer news for me of the week. Number of other people died this week, but that's the big one in the field, I think. All right, on to something a little bit happier. You guys might have remembered me talking a little bit about before the last show about that I bought a $129, actually like $124 PC on an absolute whim, and I was really curious as to see whether this thing could ever run ComicBase, because it's $124. I got it in the mail the other day, and I did set it up, but I'm going to probably put it back in the box just so I can do an unboxing video on the whole thing, because it's a bit of a trip. This is the box. That's my hand for reference scale. It's tiny. And if you thought the box was small, because the box just showed up in an envelope, it didn't take much of anything. The actual PC is this. It is the smallest darn thing. I mean, this thing makes an Apple TV look large. But I'll have a lot to say about this one. It's actually it was a pretty eye-opening experience, and like I say, I'll probably do a proper unboxing video on that one in the days to come. I've got a bunch of other things on my plate right now, but that one was fun. And if you guys need news on it urgently, reach out to me and I'll share my thoughts. But I would like to do that thing I never do, which is an unboxing video, just because it was. I think it's opening some new possibilities that I think are worth exploring. So. All right, let's push on. ComicBase news. ComicBase is now at version 30.22. It's just two thousandth versions more than it was last time at this thing. There's a couple tweaks, especially to Sidekick, that are worth having. So if you update your databases through Sidekick, it's worth downloading the update. It'll do a better job of updating item titles and a couple other optimizations in there. Other than that, we're in a in more of a holding pattern on the ComicBase 2023 versions right now, because we're spending all our efforts really on the next version of ComicBase, which is Archangel. And then, by the way, if anyone wants to be in the Archangel project, what that is we invite our customers, people who have a have a certain tolerance for seeing the horrible process of software getting made, which is to say, not beta, just dev quality. In other words, it's not all there yet when you're using it. It should be stable enough that it won't do anything bad to your machine or your database or anything like that. But it's if you're expecting it to have all the fit and finish of the final product, no, we're nowhere near there on this one. But if you're interested in seeing the very early inside work, look at the development of the next version of ComicBase, please send me a note. I'm going to put my thing up on the screen here. Yes, that worked. Bickford at human-computing.com. And let me know, especially if you're using ComicBase right now, what version of ComicBase, which edition of ComicBase you're using, and your user ID number. And I'll send you an invite to the Slack group. And from there, we'll issue you a preliminary serial number so you can download the whole thing, try it out, and be part of the discussion inside the wall. So you're chatting right with the development team as we go through the new version and talk about new features that are being developed, and you can see how that's all done. Don't feel compelled to do this at all. This is not, like I say, this is not beta testing. Beta testing is like, now we're all done. There might be one or two bugs. No, this is early stage stuff, but it is really rewarding, I think, for both us and for the people who've been in the program on previous times to be inside the wire, as they say. I don't know another company that does this, but it's something that's worked out very well for us, and we get a lot of great feedback from all you guys as we're doing it. So I value all your contributions a lot. All right, and then lastly, ComicBase news is ComicBase 2.0.6 is now officially there in the Android Play Store. Now, why should you care? What does it do that version 2.0.4 did? Exactly the same things. It's the main thing about it is it targets a later version of the Android APIs, and Google has adopted a rather interesting policy in that if you are backward compatible with really old Android devices, they actually start hiding your product from newer Android devices in the Google Play Store. In other words, if you had a brand spanking new Google Pixel phone, you wouldn't have been able to have seen the ComicBase mobile app until just now, because we were still, they call it targeting an older version of their Android kit because we didn't need most of it, uh, and so they punish that sort of behavior by hiding it from newer devices. So we are now targeting the latest and greatest version of the Android, development system. It runs no differently than it did before, and unfortunately, it also means that if you have a very old Android device, so I don't know if you're kicking around that Samsung 4 or something like that that you've had in the family for the last 8 years, Coinbase mobile would have worked perfectly well on it, and now it no longer will be seen in the Play Store because that is the will of Google, and you can't go against it apparently. So you have my apologies on that whole thing, but that is the the lords of Google have decreed it thus. So anyway, the good news though is if you do have a brand new device and you were frustrated because you couldn't find the Coinbase mobile in the App Store, have a look now and you should see it, and everything should be groovy. All right, let's see what else is happening in the world. Doop, 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 doo. Let's see here. Hello, Xanadu Comics says hi. And I'm going to mute the phone, which I should have done before the show. Ha 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 ha. Oh, hello to Oro and Xanadu Comics. And let's see here. Oh, and some people whining about wildfire smoke, which I absolutely understand. And let's see what else here. Let's see. Oh, yes, John Romita Jr. is actually in his 46th years of professional artist. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, no, I do. Thanks. I feel about 10 years older than I did about 5 minutes ago, so thanks a lot for that. No, it's, it's quite the dynasty. Like I say, at this point, I'm wondering where John Romita the Fourth is gonna be. Alright, let me see what else is going on here. Wow, someone really wants to get a hold of me, and someone's not gonna be able to do that. So alright, and now we do the thing I should have done before the show and shut off the phone. Boom. Yeah, I had an odd thought that I might want to like show the new version running on my phone, but turns out that's bad when people start calling. All right, moving on. All right, and last note I had for myself is, yes, if you're interested in joining Archangel, please send me a note, especially you, Andre, because there's a lot of things we'll be talking about that are directly related to all the work you've done with newspapers. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the big releases. So as you guys might know, once upon a time, back in the dark ages, we did a major release of Comic Base once a year. And, in the very dark ages, we would mail discs to people. It was, and say, okay, great, you had Comic Base 4, here's Comic Base 5. The mailing department would get very busy on that whole thing. Throughout the year, there might be things that we put up on the website as like the patch to version 5.0.1 or 5.0.2, but you wouldn't see a lot of activity, and when you did, it was a big bang. And so that has changed in the era of the internet. With the dawn of Comic Base 10, we started updating content because it used to be also that we tied that all in with a major database push. So we would be delivering all new prices once a year as well. So we were with Comics Buyer's Guide on somehow pricing, depending on your year, between 40 and 150,000 comic books to figure out what's this year's price for Rawhide Kid #4 or something. And there was no way you could synchronize all that effort more than once a year. Well, then the internet, got really big, and we switched to with Comic-Base 10.0, we switched to weekly updates. So basically, every week you could download everything that was new, and we started pushing pricing as soon as we knew about it. So when things started getting hot, we would roll them into the system as quickly as they could go. Atomic Avenue came along and became a live pricing source that we could rely on later on Heritage Auctions. And so along with the weekly download of new books, you could also get new updates to pricing on everything once a week. These days, once a week, and I believe our editors are working on that right as we speak right now. It might be dropping tonight. I'm not sure. We push updates based on over 1.1 million comic books are in the database right now. We look at about 2.1 million prices every week to figure out what the market price is on everything that's going on. We review, a number of auction results, that get fed into the mix and everything. So it's a big machine, and it kicks on every week. Now, along with all the content, we also push program updates. So there's no reason these days with the internet for us to give you anything but the very latest. So if you are of a mind to, if you go into ComicBase, go to Setup, and go to Preferences, and then right under the item where it says Check for Updates, if you say Show Interim Updates, then it will also show you every single little change we do to the program, and you could download that, as you go, and get, always be having the exact same, copy of the program that we're working from. Now, this can be exhausting, and we try not to wear out our welcome on the whole thing. If you guys, ever had Firefox back in the day, remember, it was impossible turning on your computer in the morning without having it grind an update or two, and it just wears you out. I mean, I'm sure you're making the product better all the time, but honestly, could you just slow roll it down a little bit here because I got to get some work done, and that's so it is possible to have too much of this. What we decided in this age of continuous releases is that we'll keep on putting program changes up as soon as we can do them and content update every week. But we're going to hold off on the required updates, the ones that we expect all you guys to download, to about once a quarter, give or take. And those are the ones that are like, you see the current version is ComicBase 2023, which fortunately synchronizes with the version number is 23. The first release is 23.0, then 23.1 was the first quarter's, update, 23.2, and so forth. And we're probably going to push a 23.3 before we say the end of the ComicBase 2023 life cycle. Now, the quarterly updates, basically what we're trying to do there is just roll together everything we changed over the past 3-4 months into one easy to chew on update. It's an excuse to handle some of the bigger things, like sometimes we'll change, say, the indexing schemes, or we'll add a new table, or do things like that. Nothing that takes a lot of time for you, but sometimes when you download one of these like quarterly updates, you'll get a note saying things like, hey, we added a bunch of stuff here. Can we go ahead and rebuild your list of creators or something, because it's way better now. But we just try not to do that stuff too much. We really want to make these quarterly updates pretty much, oh, there's an update, click, done, and then a minute or two later, you're back on your way getting your job done. Now, so what then are the yearly updates about? And that's what we're talking about here. The yearly updates, there's two things we're trying to do with them. There's a marketing thing, and there's a technical track. Now, on a marketing level, if we're going to call something ComicBase 2024 or 2025 or whatever the thing is, we want to have some kind of hook which tells you, hey, take notice. Maybe you haven't upgraded for a few years, and then we want to have at least a few things that tell you, oh, hey, this is new and interesting, or this is relevant to my life in a way that maybe an old version, hadn't been. And so we want to make a little bit of news. That is, a marketing angle. A little bit glibly, what we often say about it is, we're trying very hard to make it so that when a new version comes out, it's intolerable for you to use the old version. It's just you find like, oh man, that old thing, and that's a good trick to try to do, especially because 5 minutes before its release, you might have just downloaded the build 3022 of the whole thing, which is like exactly 1 day old, which represented most of the major feature work that was visible up until then. So trying to make the program wildly different between those things, it's a bit of a trick. The way we do it, is some months before we go to bat with the new version, is we actually they call forking the release trail. So what we'll do is we'll say, we kind of park the development over this one here. The ComicBase 2023 will be in kind of maintenance mode. We'll handle any bugs we find. If there's anything really important, we'll consider adding it in right there. But we kind of take all the major work and we start going on a different path. And we start doing like the heavy lifting and the plumbing on that one completely separately from the one. And then when it comes time to drop the next version, then we say, okay, and here's this thing we've been working on, under the covers for several months. So that's the marketing end of things. And I gotta be honest, my head's not in the marketing game right now. I would get very interested in the marketing game a few weeks before we drop it. I mean, we have to have a story, true. But main thing we have to do is we have to have our engineering game down, and that's where my head's at just at the moment. Now, on a technical level, what the major releases are for is there a chance for us to take things that we're looking at the big problems that are, either we've been having or that we see coming in the industry, and we're trying to figure out how to get ahead of them or at least deal with them before they swamp us, and set the technical foundations, there so that when the problem gets big, we're ready to go. And also, if there's like big changes we want to do with just the underlying program to modernize it or unleash new things, like the big feature of last release was we converted the entire thing to 64-bit. So, I mean, that's the time to do big changes like that. Is the big annual release. Now, I'm sorry, let me go to my notes here. Um, so, examples from previous versions. There's the conversion of 64 bits. Now, why do you care about 64-bit? Now, on a technical level, it meant that we had to rewrite every single database call in the program to use a different set of tools. That Microsoft implemented only in 64-bit versus the ones that were in 32-bit. On a customer point of view, the important part of that one is it allowed you to use the full capability of your computer. So in other words, you were no longer limited by the 2 gigs of addressable RAM that you had available in a 32-bit application. Suddenly, if you've got 8 gigs or 16 gigs or 32 gigs in your machine, suddenly you could work with very, very large lists. I mean, if you want to have the entire run of the New York Times displayed in one window, you got a 8 gig machine, not a problem. Just here you are. And then we also were able to, while we were doing that, able to do some very, I'm going to say halfway clever things with how we work with the lists in memory and do things like that, where we made them just dramatically faster than they were before. I mean, 20, 30 times faster to draw big lists like the New York Times or Commando or Action Comics. So, things that used to take 30 seconds to display suddenly display in 2 seconds. That's the sort of thing that was really exciting for us on a technical level about these big releases. Now, for us, when we're looking at the things coming up right now, um, well, some of the ones I also want to mention that we did in the last major release, we added, you might recall fields like overall title, it's or item title, which is really what we're trying to do is we're trying to grapple with the idea of what do we deal with, how do we deal with the things that are named one thing officially, but everyone either the cover calls them something else or everyone knows they're really part of a different thing. So, for instance, an item title for something like classics. You might be staring at a comic book that says, Roy Rogers, number 483 or something. And a comic geek might know that, oh, yeah, that's probably Dell 4-Color Comics number 483 featuring Roy Rogers. But the only way you would ever know that is if you'd once upon a time gotten lost in the Overstreet Price Guide and just memorized that factoid, because staring at the comic book would never have gotten you there. And this is the sort of thing that absolutely loses new customers, new users. So if suddenly your girlfriend is trying to help you index your comic books and she's coming across that, she's like, yeah, I don't see this in the database. What do I do with it? And you would have to say, oh, well, I, as the wise comic guy, know that that's secretly Dell 4-Color Comics. At that point, your girlfriend wants to hit you with it. So we came up with, we grappled with the bigger problem in the world of like how do we deal with these multi-named things. And a secondary one is how do you deal with things that, yeah, it's called personal, but it really is book 4 of the Jack Reacher series. So, well, I mean, how do I find all the books in order of the Jack Reacher series or the James Bond series or the Chronicles of Narnia or whatever else? Because if they don't say, Jack Reacher book number 4 on the cover, who would ever know? So you want to have these kind of meta organizational schemes. So we implemented all these things in previous versions of ComicBase, and now they're all integrated in. But the kind of heavy lifting had to be done really at the major release time. All right, so what are we working on now? Whew. And I'll get to Greg's bit here, advertising things in a bit. Pete lets me talk after the stream. Yeah, okay, all right. I'll take a break. I'll bring guys in for a minute because I've been teasing the idea of what we're talking about here for a while. All right. So big things we're taking on in this next release from a technical end. And again, I'm only going to talk about some of the things that we're working on. And honestly, they're not necessarily the sizzle things. They're things that technically are really important to have gotten a hold of. Like I fear for the world had we not gotten a hold of the variant letter numbering scheme, like we did a couple releases ago. Because like at this point, every single month there's a comic that comes out with more than 26 variants. And if we were still floundering about wondering what do we do when the variants go past Z, we'd be sunk. So I think we got on top of that one just in time. Some of the things I feel like we need to get on top of right now before they sink us, because the world's changing. Number one thing I'm going to say is pictures. All right, let's talk about pictures. Why do we want them in ComicBase? Why are they important? Why do we care so much? And then where are the problems? Well, all right, look, we like pictures for number one things. We will have that kind of instant recognition for which variant I'm looking at for a given title. Or for that matter, if I'm pulling up an issue of Four Color Comics number 483 second series, I want to see a picture of Roy Rogers on the cover. And again, don't fact check me on this one. I made up the number just off the top of my head, but if you guys know Four Color Comics, it's one of those ones. But anyway, but you want to be able to pull the thing up and say, "Oh yeah, that comic I'm staring at. I feel good now." So that's a huge one. And right now, I didn't run I think I ran the numbers from May, and I think it came up to 81.4 or 81.2% of all the comics with a May cover date released were a variant of one sort or another. In this insane world of ours right now, it's having the photo reference for everything is just so damn useful. We want to, you want to be able to have that picture available. Now, with that said, we also want to be able to print it on a label. So when I'm printing the ID label or the price label for the whole thing, I want to make sure I'm sticking the right label on the right book. Yeah, you want the label right on the thing you're printing. You want to have it on your reports oftentimes. And then it's also just, let's face it, comics are cool to look at. A lot of the covers are amazing. And so you want to be able to just enjoy looking at, oh yeah, this was the cover to Amazing Spider-Man number 50. That was a great Ramita cover there. Or for that matter, you want to be able to do things like pulling up the screensaver and just being dazzled by, amazing amount of covers of just all the books, that have been going out throughout the years from all across the world. I mean, that's just cool. I mean, we love this hobby because it's so visually interesting. But anyway, with all that said, that's why we want pictures, right? But what are the challenges that we're facing with putting the pictures in right now? Well, to start with, when we first shipped, pictures on the whole thing, we ComicBase 1.0 shipped on 6 compressed floppy disks, and it notoriously used to have 297 titles in it, and number 298 was meant to be the Tarzan Del Marvel, run of Tarzan. But we couldn't fit it and its picture all 13K compressed or whatever that was at the time. It was just that was the bytes that wouldn't fit on the floppy disk, and so we had to drop that title from the first release of ComicBase 1.0. Since then, like, we went to CDs when CDs became available. We went to DVDs when they became available. We were the first product to ever ship on Blu-ray, the first PC product to ever ship on dual layer Blu-ray. So we've been wanting the space to show as much cool picture data as we've had since there were discs to put them on. Well, I'm going to say starting about 10 years ago, the discs stopped being competitive to put the pictures on. In other words, our need for pictures, to put on got so far ahead of the availability of the media, and the internet started getting fast. In other words, everyone's connection to the internet got to be, it used to be like wait for, the page to download. And there were all these things in the, even 10, 15 years ago, if you built web pages, there was a thing where like you could have a low res, picture, version of the picture you want to show at the image that would preload ahead of it. And then you would swap that with the full on version of the picture when your internet caught up. That kind of nonsense is long gone. Almost everyone in the on the civilized part of the planet, and a lot of the parts in the uncivilized part of the planet have high speed internet at this point. What we don't have is optical media that fills the gap and allows us to push as much data, down physical pipes as we would like to. Blu-rays gave, birth, to, dual layer Blu-rays. And then for practical purpose, it kind of stopped there. BDXL never took off. It gets used as a mastering mechanism if you ever have a 4K or a 3D Blu-ray, but on a consumer level, you're never going to buy software that ships on BDXL. The discs themselves, I believe, are around $17 a blank. So I mean that's a dead end. It got replaced by the internet. And then companies like Apple came along and said, I don't know, internet's cool, but having a optical drive in our laptop makes it 3.5 ounces heavier and an eighth of an inch taller than it would otherwise be. And so we can't have that. We've got to have some way of getting the stuff around without the optical drive. Now, of course, we're happy to sell you a $120 optical drive you can put in your laptop bag with your growing collection of dongles that you keep with your incredibly thin laptop with no ports. That was not a contradiction in terms for Apple, but they were the first guys who started this thing as usual. But everyone else followed, and by now the majority of computers, certainly of laptops, don't ship with any kind of optical media. Even desktops, though, if you bought one down at Best Buy or wherever else, chances are better than not that it doesn't have any kind of DVD or Blu-ray media player on it. So our means to ship all those pictures around is going away. One thing that's kind of famous for us is even though a lot of us love having the physical media, we distrust the internet going away on us and things like that. The number of DVDs we shipped last year alone, like the product mix between when we ship an archive, what percentage of the copies went from physical format, people preferring the 4 disc version, and how many of them prefer to just download it. That one shifted radically. It doubled the transition from years past, and now it's overwhelmingly for all products now, including the Blu-ray. We wouldn't call it the Blu-ray anymore. We call it just the 4K version. Overwhelmingly, the product mix has shifted towards download to the point where I'm half surprised, whenever we actually ship physical things. I'm not really. We still move them, but compared to what was in years past, we used to go through just boxes and boxes and cases worth of media and products, and things were flying in physical format out all the time. And now, wow, it's really slowed down. Sales haven't slowed down. Sales are great, but it's all happening over the internet. And I think that's just a reflection of the fact that it's become more normal, faster, much more convenient to just download the things you want as opposed to try and get them on the internet. Yeah, you get them in physical format. Now, another problem we've got is because even for the people who do have the Blu-ray players and things like that, we went from a single Blu-ray to multi-sided Blu-ray to 2 multi-sided Blu-rays a couple of years ago, and we really hit the realization, even on our very high-end products, that it doesn't help the world to try to go beyond that. It's more hassle than it's worth for people. You're occupying just an incredible amount of your disk space on the whole thing, and it's too much trouble to install. Especially, it's like we went to 4 discs of the archive edition. Those are your DVDs, not Blu-rays. So Blu-rays obviously have much higher capacity, but we asked ourselves, it's like, man, it's getting hard to squish all things onto the 4 DVDs. Do we go to 6? What happens? There's a certain point where we say, at a certain point, adding more discs actually doesn't make for happier customers. It makes for more frustrated customers because it's taking too long to install the product. It seems like a real chore. And so with all this stuff going the way it is, we had to say, well, what do we do? Because on one hand, we love the pictures. We need the pictures. I mean, we need the pictures more than we ever needed them. And man, do we have pictures more than we've never had them before. I mean, we have basically, our next version will ship, if it doesn't ship with 1 million images, it'll ship with just under. Unbelievable amounts of content on that level, and you need it. I mean, you really want to be able to pull up any issue of any comic you wanted, see the cover, be able to tell it from the A, B, C, D, E, F, G variant. That's just useful. I mean, collectors want it. But we also are faced with the idea that you got no media to display it on. Downloading a ton of things is no fun. I mean, even if you've got the fast internet, it's no fun downloading, 1 million disk images and trying to wait for them to install that way and so forth. And and so forth. And also, frankly, if to any extent that we're limited by what needs to fit on a physical medium, I worry about the quality level. So, I mean, every time feel us, dialing up the JPEG compression, level in order to fit it onto a certain amount of disk space, I'm always like, oh man, because at this when you get trained to, you look at the JPEG artifacts, you can spot them from a mile away, and it hurts your soul. So, what was the answer? Well, we started getting the answer last year when we introduced the concept of quick start pictures, which is to say, all right, how about this for a try? We don't try to squish, 30, 90, however many gigs of data onto whatever version you're trying to. We still keep that as an option. You can still download it if you really want to, because God knows we all grew up that way, and we've kind of trained you to want the vast amount of just bytes on the whole thing. But how about we offer you another way? And the way we offer is we say, okay, when you install the program, we make it slightly easier for you to find the download. It's in the recommended downloads as opposed to the the all downloads. It's just one tab over. A thing called Quick Start Pictures. And what Quick Start Pictures is they're really, really small versions of all 900,000 whatever images in the database, which, because they're very small, they fit in the grid. You can instantly see them as you're going to a title. You can differentiate all the titles. You can download them pretty quickly, and they don't take a lot of disk space. They only take, I think the current set is something like 8 gigs of disk space, as opposed to 30 plus gigs for the full install of everything. And that's including, we kind of cheated a little bit. We say we'll make the number ones be full size, because when you go to a title the very first time, the very first thing you'll see is the number one picture. And so you want that one just instantly to be at the size you expect. But then we do one other thing. Anytime you click on a picture, right, or you click on an issue, you go and in any way interact with a particular issue, we pull down the high-res version at really a much superior quality of just that issue. So as you use the program, we're downloading in the blink of an eye the high-res versions of the things that you actually use. And because we're not doing that for all 950,000 pictures, we're only doing it for the ones you actually use, a couple of great things happen. Number one is, first of all, most people never notice the magic trick. If your internet connection is at all decent, like I say, by the time you clicked on it, by the time your screen, that half blink you've got while the screen draws, you've already downloaded and displayed the high-res picture, and at that point you're free to click on it and see in its full size glory. It's as if it was always there. So you never notice that we're doing this, but your computer notices, because your computer is not using anything like the amount of disk space it used to use to house ComicBase. I mean, we don't need to tell people anymore, hey, if you want the 4K edition of ComicBase, make sure you leave about 120 gigs open on your drive. We don't need to do that anymore. At this point, if you get the 4K edition of ComicBase, you can install it on as little as 15 gigs, which is much easier to do. I would still recommend a little bit more than that, but it's still a much better kind of deal. Well, that was a pretty good start. It's a bit of a hack, because we were doing some heavy lifting to make that happen. But this time out, we're going to take it one more. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to kind of try to fix the initial startup experience of ComicBase itself. So right now, for instance, if you have an archive edition of ComicBase and you want to install the regular version, say off your disks, the way it would go is you pop the first disk in there, you run the setup program, it installs ComicBase, it downloads any newest databases or things like that it needs to from the web, or Crystal Reports, whatever, it gets that from the web already. And then once you've installed the program, it then says, okay, well, yeah, it's time to install the pictures. So go ahead and go to the Install Pictures and Movies command, insert disk 1, and then hit go. Wait about 20 minutes. And when that's done, copying all the pictures from that, insert disk 2, repeat, and then repeat again for disk 3, and then repeat again for disk 4. And at that point, oh, congratulations, you've installed ComicBase. That's the current state of affairs if you want to do a conventional install of ComicBase. Now, the Quick Start is better. All right, the Quick Start version says, all right, insert the disk, run the program, and then go to our website, download the Quick Start pictures, and install them. Let that go for 20 minutes or whatever else, and then we start doing the magic trick. And now that's still, we're getting you up on your way in a fraction of the time, but this could be better, right? I mean, it's a little old school. It's a little hinky. let's take a steal a march from video games now. You buy Red Dead Redemption or Call of Duty or whatever you have. How does that how does that game install? Well, all right, let's say you got it off, let's say, if you download it from the Xbox store or, or PlayStation or whatever else, at that point, you just immediately have the latest installer, at which point, okay, we install Call of Duty and it says, okay, I'm installing the program. And then it says, all right, and now I'm going to spend about a million hours installing a 48 gig, patch update to whatever it is, and that also applies if you've got it on disk. But the main thing is, it says, okay, here's a loading screen, and we'll just be installing here for a while. We'll let you know when it's done. And if it's something really terrible, like Red Dead Redemption, which was a 2 Blu-ray disc game for me, I literally had to come back and play it about 3 nights later when it was done, installing. Most games are a little better than that right now, but the main thing they do is you install one thing and it handles the rest. Now, I was wondering if we took something that's every bit as big as Red Dead Redemption, a far more complicated install, what's the best we could do to get you to install, say, a 4K edition of ComicBase? So we did some testing, and I just timed this on my machine right before we went to air. So starting from a cleaned off machine, though, so in other words, I've uninstalled all trace of ComicBase. I'm coming in completely blank, right? Um, Basically, it comes down to you say, I want to download the new version of ComicBase. You and this is on a good internet connection. So I'll stipulate that. If you have a crummy internet connection, assume that your time is going to be a bit longer. But this right now is on a year and a half old machine, with an SSD, decent processor, but nothing that's going to set any new land speed records. I mean, it's a good machine, but it's not the fastest machine known. I think Mark Monfils has that one right now. But anyway, where we are right now is from double clicking on the I want to download the installer. 1 minute and 26 seconds later, the program and all prerequisites, which includes the stock databases, crystal reports, all that stuff that comes with a brand new installation of Compase. 1 minute and 26 seconds in, he was done. The program was ready to launch. You launch the program. And the very first thing it says is, okay, hey, you're using the archive edition, so I want to install all the pictures now. So it shows you where you want to go to install them from. Basically, it gives you a big button marked OK, and you could change the location if you, want to install to a different disk. Most people won't want to, but that option is there if you want to. You hit OK, and at 5 minutes and 23 seconds of the total install, so in other words, 4 minutes longer than the program got installed, all the big pictures for all the titles in Codebase have been installed, and you can start working. So instead of taking an hour and a half before you can really get going, you're now 5.5 minutes in, you're ready to get going. Now, you don't have all the pictures yet, because what it did as soon as it installed all the number one pictures and enough to get you rolling so you can use the database and get going is in the background. As you're doing that, it has kicked off a download for all the pictures for all media types that you collect. Now, and doing it for the default set, which is to say books, magazines, and comics, right? Not newspapers. But if we download all the pictures for all those media types, that gets going. And finally, at 18 minutes and 32 seconds in, all 950, or actually 965,000 pictures had been installed. The program's utterly there. It gives you a little note saying, oh yeah, by the way, I'm done installing the pictures in the background here. And you'd have seen, pictures appearing as you went anyway, because like I say, you could have started working 5 minutes in. I mean, you really could have started working earlier than that, but realistically, 5.5 minutes in, you're good to go. I think that's a better world. I think it's a world that works, a world that doesn't make you go back and ask you to download things 15 different times from a million different places. I think that works better than what we had going on before. Now, I think it's a fair question to say, all right, well, wait, I like installing the big versions of pictures at least as much as I could have fit on the disk. I like having the disk, thing like that. And this time out, we are going to still support the people who do want to order it on physical disk. So we will have, just like we did before, we'll do our level best to squish all the latest pictures onto the disk, right before we ship. And about once a quarter, we update those disks so that we repeat the trick. But the way I would say I would do, and what I would strongly suggest almost anyone without a special set of needs would install the program going forward, is just do it the easy way. I mean, if I were setting up on a new machine, I would click the ComicBase installer, I'd be working in minutes, and I would have the latest set of all the images as of that week, and everything new that happened, I would have it on demand. So I don't even need to think about on demand. I just start clicking around, and everything has appeared as if it was always there. I think that's a better world. Another refinement that we've got to this one, by the way, is if you have the professional edition of ComicBase, for instance, we also, how is that possible? I swear to God, I shut my phone off. Another thing that happens if you have the professional, oh, I see. I clicked the wrong one. I want to hit power off. It's the black icon. Got it. Okay. If you have the professional edition of ComicBase, we have people who call us up all the time, they're looking for tech support, doing things like that, and they got the pro edition. They never got around to installing the 60,000 pictures that come with professional edition, which it's not nothing. It's very helpful for finding its series and so forth. And so when I was like, well, didn't you ever download the pictures? I was like, no, that seemed like a lot of work. And yeah, maybe it was some work. But yes, there was a big archive full of pictures that come with Pro. Those, just like the archive edition pictures, the latest version of all the Pro pictures gets automatically installed just right the very first time you launch the program. Now, by the way, if you've already had ComicBase Archive Edition, if you've already had ComicBase Pro, if you've already got the pictures, right, then it says, oh, I see that you already got the pictures, and it just moves on. You don't need to worry about all this stuff. But if you're installing ComicBase on a new machine, it's one button, one install, one click after that to install the pictures, and you're good to go. So that's where we're looking at on the picture end of things. So I've been talking for a while. Let me hit some comments here because I'll see how we're going. All right, let's see here. All right. Tyler T, hello from Selkirk. Selkirk. Greg wants to give a quick plug for the Comic Art Museum in San Francisco. Museum itself is okay, not super great. Yeah, that's what I said. Still worth a stop. The store is available online. Is definitely worth a visit. It is, actually. And he said he picked up a copy of Gene Colan, Visions of a Man Without Fear. Scans of lots of classic Colan work. Recommended, absolutely. And Grains of Sand, almost 140 pages of original artwork for the Sandman comic series. Ooh, neat. I'll check that out. All right, thanks for the heads up. Ed asks, when is the next ComicBase After Dark? I'm going to try to do it before the end of June. I've got some travel coming up, and so I'm going to have to step around some of that. I'll get to that in a bit, but I'm thinking in the next week or two. But probably not next week for reasons, personal reasons. I have to do some travel to visit friends and stuff like that that need looking in on, and I'm also going to stop by Heroes Con. By the way, I also made a decision. I am going to San Diego Comic-Con, so anyone who's going to be out that way, please let me know. Drop me a note, and happy to say hey and grab a beer, whatever, and we'll take it from there. All right, so let's get into these other major thing I want to talk about as far as big technical changes. I mean, because the kind of stuff I'm talking about here is stuff that you just have to rethink, all the assumptions we had, just even of how pictures work, and how do you go back to revisit that for this new stuff to even make any sense. But I think you're going to like it when you see it. Next one, though, I really want to get into is creators. So we have over 90,000 different creators listed in the database. And I was going to make a guess originally about how many individual creator credits we had, because I used to know the number once upon a time. And so I in my head, I would always just well, it's probably a bit more than when I checked last time. When I checked last time was apparently a number of years ago, because I wanted to get the real number before showtime. I just wanted to throw a number up and just be wrong. So I checked right before showtime here, and we have just under 4 million individual creator credits in the database. It's psychotic how much information is in there at this point. Anyway, so with all that, and there's 90,000 some creator credits. If you print them out, and just you splot them into Microsoft Word, you wind up with a document that's 3,114 pages long currently, of just the names in alphabetical order, spaced out by default settings in the default font in Microsoft. Now, why would I want to do something like spacing them out in the default setting of Microsoft Word? And the answer is because we are undergoing a vast, vast cleanup effort on the creators. This started with, it started really with our retooling of the tech of our servers and in ComicBase to support the diacriticals and other, accent marks and so forth that are in so many creators' names. I mean, it's comic creation and baseball are like the most international. I guess if I cared about soccer, I'd say soccer, but they're the most international fields you'll ever see. And so, when you see someone like named Joe Quinones or Stepan Siedzic or whatever else, it's like that's his name is Stepan Siedzic, and I'm saying it like a Boris Badenov character or something because I don't know actually say it, but it's his actual name. Like Joe Quinones is his actual name. It's not Joe Quinones, it's Joe Quinones. There's a cedilla over the N of the after the second N, and that's his real name. You gotta, I mean, to do the man credit, you gotta call him by his proper name, properly spelled, not just what's convenient to type on an English keyboard. Same thing goes if there's umlauts or circumflexes or you name it. Over people's names, you want to be able to hit whatever it is. Now, Coinbase, we're always fairly, retentive about trying to get the stuff right over the years. But where we stepped off into the twilight zone is when we stepped out of the Windows 1252 character encoding set. So if you guys ever pull up character map in Windows and you dial it into Windows 1252, you can see that almost all the characters that would be any that we'd ever care about for the US, Western Europe, South America, they're all found in there somewhere. But what about Eastern Europe? What about Cyrillic? What about kanji? What I mean, what about so many other things there? At that point, you need to go into a character coding called Unicode, or a character type called Unicode, where the most popular encoding for it on the interwebs is a thing called UTF-8, which basically, for the vast majority of them, allows you to represent very complicated characters using the same number of bytes as you would have used before, so it's efficient. That's good. But when it comes time to have a really obscure character, you can get them all in if you need to. And so we can handle, Tony Chaz or, Chemed, Bialy or what have you, just all the crazy names we're seeing from around the world that are, current players in the comic scene. We can actually spell their names properly right now and not just try to anglicize them in order to just put them in the database. Well, you guys might recall about 6 months ago, we did a lot of heavy lifting on the database side, on the servers, to make that possible. But now we got a problem because we got a whole ton of names in here that are just they're wrong. I mean, they're spelled wrong in little ways and big. We have a million instances of Joe Quinones, being spelled as Joe Canones, but we also have some where he's spelled as Joey Q or Joe Quinones, something where it's completely misspelled, and we needed to take the time to go through that vast set of creator names and just start scrubbing the list. And also, not just fixing them up, but also trying to bulletproof them against just the same errors coming back in later on. Now, psychic typing, which is the autocomplete that we have going on right now, it's a really smart kind of autocomplete. As you start typing a name, it will automatically suggest to you the rest of the name. And so if you type Joe space Q in an artist field, you'll probably be at Joe Quinones right there. At that point, just hit tab, move on, you're good to go, and it'll fill out the proper thing. It does all that, but one thing we need to do is we needed to, first of all, we were making a rev to Psychic Typing 2.0. It's now Psychic Typing 2.1, which will go back and let's say you're typing in George Perez, right? There's an accent over the the first E in Perez. Most Americans are going to type that as Georg space PE, and at that point you'll see, oh, it auto-completed as Perez, except that you already typed the wrong E. Now it knew to match against the wrong E, but the part that you typed is the part that it typically keeps. It's only the autocomplete part that it swaps out. Nowadays, what we're doing is we've incorporated through the program the ability to auto standardize and also autocorrect when possible. There's sometimes it can be done, sometimes it can't, right in the field. But it looks the same on the technical level, when it does it. But basically, even though you typed in George Perez, we can automatically, yeah, by the time you've exited the field, tabbed out or done whatever else, you'll see if you choose to auto standardize these names, it will automatically change it to George Perez as soon as it goes. Same thing goes for Joe Quinones or whatever else. Um, and also even the strange ones involving things like capitalization. So you guys might know the artist named Cafu. It turns out that the guy who works the comics field is CAFU, all caps, and that's the proper way of spelling it because apparently it's short for like Carlos Andrea, Valente, whatever. It's some incredibly elaborate Latin American name. Not to be confused with Cafu, capital C, lowercase AFU, different guy, as it turns out, who apparently is a very famous football player. Um, anyway, so we have all these, literally at this point, thousands of autocomplete rules built into the database now to both fix the existing problems that we've seen in the database, but also to make so that when people type things in the future, they get automatically fixed. So they don't, the errors don't just keep on coming back, and that's coming in the next version of ComicBase. It's a pretty big change. Just in doing this for the last couple weeks, when you actually see the corrected list versus the current one, and you let it go and rebuild all the creator names and standardize the things like there, and put all the John Romitas into John Romita Senior now, and just so that when you find one, you get the whole list, and not the list isn't scattered between three different misspelled in slight ways versions of the same guy. When that's all done, you see like correction counts of like 100,000 items got patched up or corrected or formatted better and so forth. These are big deals. And so you're going to see a lot of the stuff coming forward. And honestly, we needed to do this. We needed to do it to handle diacriticals and handle internationalization of comic names. But honestly, we need to do it just out of respect for the creators. We want to make the database as clean as possible. A database this big will never be perfect. It's something that we've dealt with since the very beginning. But at this point, it's the biggest database for a reason. But we want to make it the best database as much as possible, and that is a major effort that we have going on in the next version. And you're going to see a lot of changes on that regard. Last thing I'm going to say in this one, I'm putting this topic out here just for Andre. At that point, I'm going to sign off for now because I'm losing my voice. Our friend Andre did yeoman's work in bringing newspapers and other series to the database. One of the things we had to do when we got into separating out magazines and other periodicals that were like comic books but not comic books, like for instance the boys journals and things like that, they didn't really quite fit the definition of comic book and so forth. Just if nothing else, we had to keep the Guinness rating straight for our friend who, one of our customers has the world's record as the largest comic collection according to Guinness. Well, we had to obey the Guinness rules to only classify as comic books things that they classify as comic books, which is to say it had to actually contain comic stories in it. So even if it was comic size, so for instance, think about Marvel previews, if it doesn't actually contain comic stories in it, it doesn't count as a comic book. It counts as a magazine or it counts as something else. Well, all right, long digression. But one of the big things we did when we started getting heavier into things like magazines and newspapers, we realized we're going to encounter a lot of periodicals that don't follow the traditional comic naming standards as far as comic books. I mean, a little bit in the 40s they did this, but not so much, since then. Typically, they'll number them just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so forth. They wouldn't typically go volume 1, number 2, volume 1, number 3, volume 1, number 4, and then volume 2, number 1. I mean, they, like I say, it happened on a couple of titles back in the 40s and 50s. Definitely not the normal way of going. But when you get to magazines and particularly to newspapers, that kind of volume and issue numbering, absolutely standard. We refer to it as season style numbering. So if you ever see, I don't know, if you ever, try to download like, episodes of some popular TV series from, some torrent site. Yeah, even like the pirates of the world have figured out that, oh yeah, if I want to download this thing, it's S06E01, it's season 6, episode 1 of whatever the thing is. Um, but hey, yeah, pirates, sometimes know a good organizational scheme when they've got one. And if we're going to talk about, volume 27, number 153 of the Boston Globe, um, you know, uh, if the only thing I've got to say is volume 2, number 153, I'm a fool if I try to do what we did with comic books in the early days and essentially unwrap that into saying, well, okay, it's volume 27, number 153, and it was published every weekday since March 8th, 1873, which I've counted my calendar means that you've now published 16,453 issues to this point. So I'm just going to artificially call that issue number 16,453. That's insane. We can't do that. We did it once with heavy metal based on the people over at heavy metal sending them. They sent us a floppy disk with their entire publishing schedule in the early days of ComicBase because they didn't have coherent issue and numbers. They kind of like would publish sometimes 5 times a year, sometimes 7 times a year. Sometimes they had 15 special editions. But they sent us their entire what they thought was their entire publishing history. And in order to get it to fit into the scheme we were using ComicBase, we then went and unwrapped that and said, okay, volume 5, number 6 would really be issue number 53, and we would put the mappings into the notes field. And that was great until we discovered about a year after publishing, based on the publisher's data, that they'd forgotten 2 or 3 issues. They just left them out. And so we had to insert issues in the middle of a sequence, which can't be done. Not in Keep Your Mind. So anyway, when we decided we were going to get into magazines and newspapers, we decided we are not going to, if they don't bear a number on them which says that this is issue number 17,453, we're not going to call it 17,453. We're going to call it what it's called looking at the newspaper. Volume 27, number 5 or whatever the thing is. But the way we do that is we'd essentially synthesize it into saying, okay, well, it's a daily paper, which means there's nominally 365 of them a year, which means it'll be 27,365, and then we'd put a little note in next to it which says, in case you couldn't figure out our naming scheme, which we use everywhere, for the volume, the season style numbering, it says vol 27 number 5, right next to it. All right, with all that as preamble, we have now at this point added over 3 million, 3 million newspapers to the database, as well as countless magazines that also follow volume and numbers type standard of entering things. And one thing, if you've been in the business of submitting this sort of information to us, or even dealing with the stuff that was submitted, is it's enormously annoying both to create long runs of numbers that are, they're kind of sequential, but they're kind of not. Which is to say, like, if let's say I can take the example of the Boston Globe, right? It's a daily newspaper, right? It ran from 1878 to the current day. It is now on volume called 153, right? And I want to create in the new issues thing, I want to create, all right, let's put together skeleton entries for Boston Globe, volume 1, number 1 through volume 153 issue, looks at today's paper, 14. Okay. Well, what you want to be able to do, and what you can do with regular titles in ComicBase, is you want to say, all right, add issues 1 through baja, and it makes them. Well, we've added the ability with season style series like this, things that don't have a sequential issue number, but which do have a periodicity, how often they're published, and they have a number of, of issues per volume. We now have the ability to say, all right, yeah, make Boston Globe now, create volume 1, number 1 through volume 153, number 4, and it just makes them all. And better yet, it will also automatically put the note in, which decodes the issue number to something sensible. And in addition to that one, and this is why I want to make sure Andre was on the call on this one, if there was any lack of standardization, because sometimes if you've done all the work to figure out the geometry of the series and so forth, you don't have the patience to even go down 17,000 issues and say vol 1 number 1, vol 2 number 1, and vol 1 number 2, vol 1 number 3. That you'll lose your mind. And so a lot of times that stuff didn't get filled in, or got filled in partially, or maybe the format was a little hinky, whatever else. The cleanup that's in ComicBase, and you'll be seeing this in probably the next week or two, will automatically standardize that stuff. It'll automatically populate it when we see a season style series like that. And so we've taken the vast brunt of work out of just creating series like this, so that when it comes time to add in I don't know, the Williamson County Gazette or something like that, or the was it the yeah, I think USA Today is already in there, but just whatever your local thing is, or your local magazine of interest to you that's run 73 volumes, and it's kind of like there, yeah, it takes all the work out of doing that sort of thing, and once it's put in there, it puts it in a nice, neat, standardized thing. But once you see that, you'll also see that, okay, the very first time that it does a cleanup on this thing, don't be surprised when it says, yeah, we just cleaned up 2 million items in the notes field. Everything will look much nicer and much more standard when it's all said and done. But that first update after we roll this out is going to take a few minutes longer than usual to process, because it's doing a lot of lifting. Anyway, that's kind of a preview for now on some of the stuff we're up to. There is much more. A lot of the sexy kind of more user interface stuff, or more feature-based stuff, that's more like, hey, can I do this one little thing that I've been trying to do a little easier? I'm going to save a lot of the stuff for later. And there's one really, really big thing, which is an integration issue with Atomic Avenue, which I think is going to be massive for both systems. I mean, I think it's an absolute game changer for both of those. I can't get into that one right now, but that'll also be part of the next major update. But that's some of what we're thinking of. If you'd like to be part of this adventure, once again, I'm going to give you one last punch of the button here. Please do reach out, pbickford at human-computing.com. And again, I'll happy to invite you in on the Slack and the whole thing. And you can join us as it gets going. Let me check the comments, and then let's get out of here. So, so let's see. I'm mentioning that Sedil. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yes, Fred. Thanks for on that. You said I was saying Sedilla over the end for Nunez, where it's really it's Tilda. Sedilla is a different character. That's like the way you see on like Francois, with the C Sedilla. That's a little curvy bit at the bottom of the C, not the curvy bit over the top of the N. Let's see here. Is the cleanup on the psychic typing for names going to carry over through typing names in the notes or item description, only creator fields? It's a great question. The intention right now is it's only going to be creator fields, because the cleanup is based on knowing really, really what you're talking about as you're typing. So, for instance, the suggestions for if I'm typing in a comic inker field, the suggestions you get there are utterly different than the suggestions you get if you're typing in the editor field. They're utterly different than the suggestions you get if you're typing in a book editor field, and so forth. And they're based on the frequencies based on that. If you're just talking about a free form field like a item description, there isn't an autocomplete I can do on that. I think the case we're both thinking of, I'm going to guess, is you want to see something like, cardstock cover C by Francavilla or something like that. You want to be able to, or, by, Carlos Nunez or something. You want to be able to, as you start typing Carlos Nunez, wouldn't it be cool if it would automatically fill Nunez? I don't think we're that cool. Because one of the things, as you start replacing people's typing, you need to be very, very certain what you're replacing with is the right thing. And I don't have the confidence level to know that I can get that right. What I do think we can probably get right is if we are suitably straight about the way that we are laying out covers these days, or the way we are laying out item descriptions, the way we name variants. Is typically we say, blah, blah, blah kind of cover by name of cover artist. What we can do is we can look at the cover artist, which was auto-completed, and if we see that it says by and it looks to be the same guy, we can, after you are, finishing up the issue, because the item title is right at the top. You haven't necessarily put in the cover artist yet, but as you're done with the issue, we can kind of auto edit that issue. Where if you said by, Carlos Nunez, but you didn't put this, you didn't put the tilde over the N in that one, but you did have it, it had auto completed properly in the cover artist field. We could conceivably, I think with good confidence, auto fix the item description at that point. It would look the same at the end of the day, but you wouldn't see it happening as you're typing. So I think that's, if that's the case you're thinking of, then I think we're on the same, lines on that one. But like I said, I do think the limit we've got, where we can't be super aggressive about the autocomplete, is when the field type, like notes or item description, is more unbounded about what you're talking about. We can't have the same level of confidence, not until we know what you're talking about. All right. All right, let's see here. Oh yes, and Andre says you should do this for publisher too. Um, Publisher, we need a cleanup on that one. It's not as big a job, and I think there's a lot more judgment calls, where, just even things like, Marvel versus Marvel UK versus, whatever else. I think that's one where I think the way we'll probably handle that one is just pushing our own editors to do a scrub on that one before we, go too far on things. But yes, in the general spirit of the age, there's definitely some cleanup that needs to be done, and which I do think we'll be doing on that. The vast majority of new titles get, they get pushed through, our editors is the usual place for the things, and secondarily, things like, when you are adding your own and you autocomplete, that plays a role as to what, comes to the front in terms of, the suggestions. I'm not sure if publisher is, I don't know if it's a strictly alphabetical, which is to say like a psychic typing 1.0 autocomplete, or if it's a 2.0 where it takes into account the relevance in the field. Worth looking into, because I think we could make that smarter and more error resistant, if we did add that. So it's something I should look into. Thanks for the note on that. All right, let's see. Greg wants to remind us, everyone, as we get to the top of the hour, reminder we have a dedicated thread on the ComicBase message boards where you can request topics and demos for the live stream. Absolutely. Um, all right, let's see. Yeah, and Fred, I think he's talking about the problem with heavy metal of Marvel with 25.1.2.3. Yeah, the difference on that one is that Marvel actually numbered them 25.1.2.3. The problem with heavy metal is we'd gone to all this effort to try to say, volume 37, number 5 was really issue number 128, from our master list. But if then we find out that there was a volume, that there was a volume 37 number 6 that it was inserted in the whole thing that wasn't on their list or something, at the end of a year, we'd already said the next issue was volume 38 number 1, and you couldn't insert it between the two things and keep your sanity. It just made no sense. I don't know if we put them as a point issue or as a /A, but it was a mess. And the worst part is it happened a year or two into, heavy metal existing as a title, so we couldn't fix it after the fact, without scrambling people's inventory. So when you see those kind of irregularities, if you browse the heavy metal listings, those have been with us for 28 years now. All right. Oro says, does the periodicity take into account leap years and century, for newspapers, for century marks? No, it doesn't. And I thought about that, and it doesn't matter too much. So the reason, all right, so this is, I'm going to geek out on time. And thank you, Oro, for the opening on this one. All right, so we all know the deal about leap years and leap seconds and whatnot. So, or leap centuries. Let's say leap seconds doesn't matter to this particular case. But so the rule on leap years, is every 4 years. There's 366 days. So if you've got a daily newspaper, right? So it's 365 issues almost all the time, but every fourth year, it's really 366. So when you say autocomplete, 153 years of New York Times, let's say that's a thing, and it says it's a daily, it's going to create issues number 1 through 365 for all the years that you say go the range at, and it'll do that in a number of seconds, right? But it'll only have gone to 365. Now, this is not perfect. I'm gonna say I'll admit this one fully. But I'm also gonna say it's also not destructive if you then go back and say, "Okay, you know, in the 27th volume, there should have been 366 issues because at that point it's easy to add the 366th issue. It doesn't interrupt the sequence because of the season style numbering left a lot of space for the ad. So it's a relatively minor chore to add any leapified issues if they had them. I also did a quick check on that one, and apparently it's not necessarily a given as to whether or not people do leapified issues. And same thing goes for things like there are comics and journals and things like that. They're published 12 times a year, except when they feel like it, which is, sometimes we do a 13th issue. Sometimes we only do 11 because someone got busy. So, you can go and add and delete the little irregular things after you're done. It's that part's not a big deal because the heavy lifting already got done. The little tiny bits of patch up, not a massive issue. And I don't have enough confidence in the publishing histories of the different players involved to want to try to work that into the algorithm, especially because it makes the algorithm really complicated. Um, all right, let's see, and yeah, leap year in 2000, but 1918 and 1700 did not have them. Yeah, so the deal on leap years, if I've follows, is it's every 4 years except when it fits on a leap century, at which point I think it's every 400 years, then it applies it, and it doesn't otherwise. Because this is all the convolutions we try to do to try to keep the Gregorian calendar into a rough approximation with the position of the Earth, or as it orbits around them, around the sun every year. And try to keep the season straight. So, what the heck. But yeah, thank God leap seconds didn't enter into the equation. All right. Let's see here. Fred says, and another reason why the compound information in the item description field repeating cover artist is a database. No, yeah, absolutely. Don't, don't do cover by this guy and that guy. Just say cover by this guy. All right, Mike Wagner. Since the cover artist has a dedicated data field, the note can simply identify the nature of the cardstock number and not repeat the name of the cardist in that field. It's true, but it's more convenient, and certainly for printing on labels and things like that, if the identifying information of a variant is all contained in one field and it doesn't require you kind of looking back and forth. I mean, it'd be a little bit more efficient, and God knows if you guys follow Boyce Codd normalized format for databases, they would certainly applaud you're not wanting to duplicate any kind of data in the database. For consistency reasons. Yeah, as far as a real life usage case on the whole thing, what you want to do is you really want to have one field that you're looking at as you go down the list, which says, oh yeah, it's this cover. It's the C cover because it's the one that was done by Francavilla, or it's the D cover because it's the one that was, the red foil, blah, blah, blah. You want to have one source of that. You don't want to have to keep on skipping between that and the cover artist field to figure out what's what. So that's why we do it. All right. And Agent de Camp, welcome. Hail. Let's see here. Need more. Yeah, and Fred, I think I've explained why we do it. All right. So we're talking about foreign publisher names, but yeah, we also it's part of a larger effort. If you were to actually look at the autocorrect table, we call it the creator aliases table. It's maintained by the ComicBase editorial. We're kind of keeping an iron grip on this one of what the official listing is for all these guys. Your choice as a user is to say, did you want to allow us to standardize the creator names, or do you want them exactly the way you entered them? If you just want them exactly the way you entered them, then we won't standardize your names. But we really encourage you hit the standardize button, because it's having less bogus entries is a good thing. But anyway, we have the official diacriticals, we the official, the guys I hate are the guys who are like, okay, I'm Juan Francisco, I'm Joey Francisco, I'm Joseph Francisco, I'm Joe Francisco the third, I'm Joseph A. Francisco, and I'm Joseph A. Francisco the third. that guy drives you crazy, especially because you find out, just when you think you've got it all down, that, like Stephen V. Ziskowski and Stephen C. Ziskowski, turns out it's not a typo. One's the other guy's dad, probably. It's like you actually have to do research for some of this stuff, and it makes you nuts. So it helps us a lot to know what our most popular signing one is when we're choosing what the official name is. We largely go by the one that's used the most, but in case of the times, like I remember, I think Alex Acuna was one where the one that was used the most was still misspelled. So in that case, the one that was used the most, but with the proper characters, is the one that we're using. But anyway, like I said, you'll see a lot of changes in the next update as far as cleanups. All right. What else we got going on? Skip the issue. I'm glossing over the add or drop of leap years. I'm not glossing over it. It's just I'm just saying, once you said create 23,000 issues, boom, go. The fact that you may want to go back, depending on whether the publisher published leap issues for, every 4 years there was an extra issue on the whole thing. I'm just saying it's not a major job. It's not the kind of job that creating the 27,000 issues to start with would have been. It's an extra 5 minutes of time in these extreme cases rather than an extra 5 days of time, which is what it would have been. We literally, Andre used to submit these things. They were drawn up in Excel, and we'd have to import them in especially because it was so impossible to create these kind of discontiguous ranges. All right. Let's see here. Okay, as in we got that. All right. Except the 360 issue of February 26th, like between 15 and 51, 360. Yeah, because of this of the season style numbering of these things, it winds up not actually mattering. It doesn't interfere with. You don't need to insert it into the middle of the sequence. What happens is, I believe, if because I believe it will also increment cover dates, and I believe that when it increments cover dates, it will do that properly, because when we're defaulting the cover date, it will figure out that year had you say I'm publishing a daily thing. It'll figure out that the day after February 28th, 1980 was February 29th, 1980, not March 1st, 1980. It will do that. The thing I was particularly worried about for the sake of the discussion, though, was whether or not it would create, volume 27, 028, 029, all the way through 365. If there was a 366th issue in that year, is it a problem or not? And I believe that it's not a problem. All right, so covering the item description. So first thing is having the cover artist field, and then repeating the cover artist name in the item description. Yeah, like I said, I think we covered that one. All right, so Agent DeCamp says, what about adding a cover colorist field? I wonder. That's one we've finessed over the years. It's we've had the colorist field, and we've had the cover inker field. And when we wanted to add a cover colorist field, we basically, in the current version of things, we kind of do like a special hack on the indexing where if you say parenthesis cover on it, we'll mark you down as having, acted as a colorist for the whole thing. But, we pull that out of the indexing so it doesn't pollute it, saying parenthesis cover on that, and you wind up going down as a colorist. You don't wind up going down as a cover colorist because there's no cover colorist field. I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm. No, I'm honestly I'm downright tepid about the idea of adding a dedicated cover colorist field. I guess I'd have to feel that there's a strong need for it as opposed to just people just feeling completely overwhelmed. Because there's always an urge to have one more thing. I got to tell you, adding new fields, one more thing is hard at this point. It's enormously time consuming to get a new field through the whole process, to make it compatible with previous versions, to make sure that it can be submitted on corrections and brought through through updates, and brought down and so forth. It's not a small deal. It's not a small amount of effort, and so if you're going to do it, you got to really need it. And that's when I gotta say, for at least 20 some years, it's kind of The solution has been, like, okay enough that we've gotten away with it without, really any massive pushback, and I'd say unless there got to be massive pushback by the cover colorists union, I think I'm inclined to leave it be because I feel like they've got other things in the fire, but, who knows? Okay, let's kick on. Oh, Porter's Hide. Hey, welcome. Um and he said, "Not sure if I asked this before, but is there a way to make reports saved to the web public? I'd like to send people links to my checklist." Um, I don't know. I'll be honest about it. I believe, and I'm going by memory here because I gotta admit it's a feature that I used to use a lot and I don't use a lot now. Was saving reports to the web in that format. I'm not sure if they're locked behind your account paywall or not paywall, but your account security or not. I don't believe they're a publicly accessible URL. Um, the way I would do it is do the same report, but instead of saving it to web, just go generate the report, export as a PDF, and send people the PDF. It's I think a more supportable solution as far as viewing it. And the way you would do that is just pick the report of your choice, do a do a preview on it, and at the very top of the preview window, there's a really bad icon. I mean, it looks like like a square with a arrow pointing off of it for no apparent reason. I mean, this it's part of the Crystal Reports icon amazingness. But anyway, right at the very top left of it is one that says export, and just choose export to PDF. Mail the guy your PDF, and that's a good way to go for all those sorts of things. If you want a more compact format for the same thing, uh, just if you've got the Pro or better, just file export is will give you a text file of the whole thing, which could be attached to any email you want, and gives people the most compact way in terms of file space to see your stuff. All right. Oh, and he says, yeah, you have to log in to do it. All right. Oh, and thank you, Agent de Camp. Everyone, smash that like and share with everyone. Thank you very much. All right, cool. All right. Well, I think that's about it. And Horace Eyes is still lobbying for memorized reports. Shoot me an email, support@comicbase.com or pbickford@comicbase.com with more details on what you're thinking on that one. I could go a couple different ways of what I'm thinking you're thinking on that one, but I don't know. But if you have, the more specific you can make the use case for me, the more likely I am to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I get it." So we'll take it. All right, guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. You guys have a great one, and we'll see you on the next one. Oh, just a brief programming note before I sign off. Like I said, I got to be doing some traveling this next week. It's a little variable because I'm visiting some people where I might need to be out later than I plan on, depending on certain situations on the ground. But there may or may not be a live stream next week, but I will try to keep you guys posted. If I'm back in town, we'll certainly try to do one, and we'll also try to get the Comic Base After Dark going. All right, guys, you have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.